What is up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of the Sunday Slaughter podcast. And today we are going to talk about the Slaughter House Rules Tournament that I'm putting on that starts February 15th on TTS. So before we get right into it, I just want to introduce my guests. We have my co-host, Charles. We have Max back again. And then we also have Tim. You may recognize Tim from a few of the battle reports I've done. He plays Baratheons and Lannisters. Which one was the one that we recorded last, Tim, that you were featured on?
That was the part one of Blackwater Bay. So I was playing as Davos.
That's right. So why don't you talk about how long you've been playing the game and why you chose Baratheons and Lannisters as your focus?
Sure. So I actually got into the game right when COVID lockdowns were happening. So I had bought a starter box and then I couldn't play anymore. So I had plenty of time to start painting up my army before lockdown stopped and could rejoin some people for a tournament like a week later. Originally, I wanted to play as Baratheons, just kind of saw it as the army that was a little newer, less people were playing it, kind of had a cool theme. I really liked the look of the guys. Unfortunately, due to supply, I wasn't able to get a Baratheon starter box, so just picked up the Stark Lannister starter box and kind of was more drawn to Lannisters. And then just kind of stuck with them, and just seeing all of the options that the army had so much fun just playing around with different lists that you could make and really kind of going with that.
And I'll ask this question to Max too. Now that season 2 has wrapped up, what did you guys think about playing some of these thematic battle reports?
Oh, I loved it, man. I thought that it was pretty fun with list building because, you went back to the part of the story and you're trying to figure out who would have been there and how they would influence the fight. So even with the NCUs, you're trying to figure out, okay, what NCU would be appropriate here, which one wouldn't be. So I know I was throwing a lot of different lists back at you to try to figure out who would be where. It was even cool when you were running some of the ones that I wasn't a part of directly, but you'd bring up, this is the fight we're going to do. And we'd have a little chat about, okay, well, these guys got to be in the list because they were definitely there. These ones can't be in the list because they definitely weren't. And so on and so forth. That was a lot of fun. And I think one of the biggest draws about Song of Ice and Fire, for me at least, is the setting and the cool story and the characters. So having an opportunity to try to reenact that was a whole lot of fun and just pulled you more into that lore and story. I know for me, if a game doesn't have a richness about its backstory, I won't stick with it for very long. But if a game has a really cool theme and story behind it, it'll pull me in, even if it's not my type of game, So what do you think, Tim?
So, yeah, I loved going back and seeing just like what units would make sense for a specific battle. Just thinking back to Jaime in the Battle of the Whispering Wood, like what is the setting? What is the context in which Jaime is actually going to fight Robb? Finding a battle mode that's going to fit around that. What in the lore is going to make sense in terms of who you're bringing? So it adds an extra dimension to the list building outside of just what are the units that I normally like to build. And then when you have certain elements like, I have to run Jaime Commander. Okay, what would you do to make that commander actually work? What would you do to make some of these pieces that fit story-wise, but aren't necessarily like maximum in terms of like what you're running against your opponent? What could you complement it with to make that battle actually fun and enjoyable?
This season has been an absolute blast. I had a great time playing you guys. Shameless plug for the season finale that I just released on Sunday. You guys check it out if you haven't. Max can attest that it was it was completely
crazy.
Ridiculous towards the end there. Yeah, I totally threw the game. I mean, spoiler alert, but definitely if you haven't watched it, stick around for the end because I couldn't have written a better ending for this season. So, okay, so season 2 has ended. Season 3 is coming up. Quick overview of that. We are doing patron-submitted lists. We'll also feature some fan-submitted lists too that, you can go on Facebook and provide any lists that you think we should run on camera. I'd be happy to take a look at every single list and then we'll choose one from there. On to our show's topic. So, the Slaughter House Rules is a TTS tournament, and Going back to how much fun I had list building for these thematic battles, I was like, okay, how can I introduce this to the community? Because being in the competitive mindset for the past 6 months, there really wasn't any joy in list building for me. I sort of knew what was powerful. I knew what to expect in every tournament. I wanted to create a format that sort of, inspired creativity. It also would be fun to see how other players pilot the lists that you create. So there is some interaction there as well. The premise is essentially each team builds 8 lists, one for each faction, and that includes Greyjoys. And then every round, each team is assigned another team's list to choose from. So importantly, teams are not building lists for themselves. The first round, you play against your own lists. And then the 5th final round, you play as your 4th worst performing lists. So essentially, I wanted some kind of aspect in the tournament to make sure that there wasn't going to be a Lannister list that was like one unit and like the rest of them were turncoats. Like something janky like that, or like a no NCU list. As competitive gamers, people are going to try to break the system, and I'm sure people still will. But after consulting with players in the community, I felt like what we set up for this tournament adds a nice amount of balance. Granted, there is a level of integrity to make sure that they're staying within the spirit of the event. This is not competitive whatsoever. It's not ranked on stats. This is so, you can sort of flex your brain a little bit and figure out what lists would do well, not only for yourselves when you play in the last round, but also, how other teams are going to pilot the lists that you make. There are a few list building restrictions. Unfortunately, I had to enforce these because when I first posted the initial draft of the tournament document, people were like, oh, what if a team did this and made it, MPE for the rest of the team? So I had to implement these restrictions. So there is a 2 NCU minimum and a 4 NCU maximum. All 40 points must be spent. And we're using the new game modes, but we're using Old Book 1.6. Maybe I'll turn it over to Charles. You were one of the first ones that said you were totally down because, when I was trying to figure out a format, I was sending you ideas. I was sending, our gaming group ideas on sort of how to make this balanced yet fun for those who would want to join. So what did you think initially of the concept?
I thought it was great. I really enjoy alternative formats in wargaming. As a guy who's a real big tournament chaser or meta chaser kind of thing like that, these types of formats are a fun just exercise to break from that. Getting in reps, there's still a lot to learn about, pacing the board and things like that. Fundamentals still matter, no matter how silly the lists get. And they also usually create an opportunity for a guy like me to bring people in my community who aren't quite ready to get into competition into playing, if it's in the store, a 6-7 hour event, right? That's a marathon. So if we had this at a local shop, that would be a barrier of entry for some people. They're not used to playing that many games in a row. These types of formats really get me excited, and I was pretty hyped for the idea.
Is there anything that stands out there to you, Tim and Max, because you are both on a team with Bob and one other person, as 2 players that really weren't involved in the TTS competitive scene at all? Why are you involved with this?
I think for me, it's kind of getting a chance to do one of these tournaments. I definitely love that it's more of a fun community building thing as opposed to a ultra competitive tournament. The fact that it's going to be 4 players on a team, I know the guys on my team, so just getting a chance to play with Max, and then Bob, and then also Brandon, the 4th guy on our team. Just really excited for that. And just really seeing what can happen over the course of these, 5 games, seeing what people are going to submit as lists and seeing how people kind of approach the list building. I think it's just a really interesting tournament format.
Yeah, I agree with what Tim said. So having only played in one real TTS thing, and it was more of a league that we ran locally, Chris, that you were in too, it gives me a chance to do something competitive. And as you know, I'm usually the TO, and I usually withhold from being in our tournaments because I wouldn't want anyone to ever get upset about conflict of interest in our, in-person tournaments. So I always sideline myself. So it's a cool opportunity to get some competitive play going. And then Bob, he like beat the heck out of me to do this with him. Because he really wants me to stay hooked on the game and stay interested in every way that I possibly can. So he did his job there. But then, as Tim mentioned too, like I've never had a game against Tim or Brandon that I haven't really enjoyed myself. Tim is one of those guys that will run commanders because he thinks they're cool and not because, he looked up and found online that that's the strongest commander. And like he's given me real runs for my money with Jaime Commander Lannisters that other people with much more quote unquote competitive lists haven't really been able to do. So it's kind of cool to play with him because I know that he's going to actually he's probably going to be the sleeper in our whole team because he's used to running weird lists anyway. So
he's the only Tim is the only person that is like, I'll run Jaime Commander any day. And I'm like, dude, total respect to that.
Yeah. Even when he runs Baratheons, he'll run off meta stuff. So it's really cool. It's actually really cool because he and I both play Baratheons, but we play them really differently. And that's a lot of fun. Gary also plays Baratheons, and Gary and I play Baratheons really similar because he came from neutrals then to Baratheons. I went neutrals, free folk Baratheon. So we all, Gary and I run a lot more similar, but Tim runs a really different list. So he's going to actually probably crush it in this tournament. So it'll be fun to be on his team for that too. So, and then we all got to make sure that Lord Commander Bob doesn't look bad because he sucks. Just kidding, Bob. We love you.
Yeah, so it's funny you guys mentioned playing off-meta stuff, right? So these types of events are perfect environments for the anti-meta warriors out there to like plant their flag and have a good time and flex their understanding of mechanics and how they like to play, which I think is awesome. So those are some people who should really be looking at getting into these types of events. I also think these events are really important for people who are trying to keep their friends interested. Like you said, like Bob reached out to you and wanted you to stay involved. The community right now, pretty much globally, is feeling a bit of tournament fatigue because 1.6 has been live for so long. And these types of events, same thing for ELO events, same thing for Loki Breeze narrative event, and things like that. So those things are really good palate cleansers for your tournament players. They're still playing, they're still rolling dice, they're still getting a feel for their lists and their unit values on the table and kind of what they can and can't do. Can this unit measure up to this unit, etc. Without the added pressure of, I'm going to see 11 activation Starks, or I'm going to see top tier free folk with mammoths, or I'm going to see Mother of Dragons 4 out of 5 rounds. You're going to have much more variety. You're going to have a chance to have some laughs. You're going to have cool stories about units one-rounding things or dancing with things that they normally should get outclassed by because they don't have those commander cards to buff them per se. And a lot of people are going to say, well, is it really practice if we're not playing in a competitive environment? I like competitive play, and why would I intentionally play bad lists? That is one way to look at it. However, if you're looking at it in terms of having a healthy community and having a healthy gameplay experience with your friends and finding ways to bridge those barriers between your friends who are on the fence to play competitive games versus casual games, narrative leagues versus tournaments, and getting people to consistently show up to your organized play days, to your demo days, to your events, these are the types of events that nurture those parts of the community. So even as a tournament chaser where this is not your cup of tea, it gives you a chance to show up and support those people that this is who it's for, so that they feel seen, they feel supported, and they're much more likely to listen to you in terms of coaching, in terms of how to value their units, how to value their activations, and all these different things. They still create those coachable moments that give you a chance as a competitive player to create the sort of proving grounds that then lead to a more competitive meta, which is ultimately what your goal should be. no one's goal should be to be a competitive player in a meta of one that chases other people away. If your goal is to be the big fish in a small pond and stomp on everybody else who doesn't take the game seriously at a competitive level, then we can still have those healthy conversations, you and I. You should DM me because it's not the scope of this podcast, because I have some opinions on those things too. But these are the types of situations that give you a chance to build communities, to play healthy competitive games in later. So these types of events are really important for preventing burnout, building relationships, having laughs, and in some cases, really starting to appreciate a different line of thought, seeing different vectors on the table and how to play, because you're playing in a more constricted environment to a degree. You don't have the full toolbox, you have half the toolbox, and things like that. And the other part for this event particularly is that it's probably, if you think about it, most likely going to be a Walder-less meta and a Varys-less meta, as well as low-tier Starks and things that we're going to see changed in 2021. And the reasons why is because there's such a negative play experience for most people right now, 1.6. So why would they put them in a list that they're hoping they don't have to worry about beating, right? They don't want to see that list. They don't want to lose to it round one, and they don't necessarily probably need the tools to win in round 5. So it's also a good chance to value your units as they exist now in the current rules without those big distractions. So there's whole unit combos and attachment combos that become viable now because Walder doesn't just turn them off. One of my favorites is Bone Lord's Chosen and Rattleshirt Attachment, right? That's a 10-point unit that cannot exist in competitive play because of Walder, almost purely because of Walder by himself. That unit does nothing in most of your games. However, that becomes a house of a 10-point unit right now in this event. Because even in competitive play, if you bring in Egret, you turn off Rattleshirt, and then that unit loses its free charge on being targeted with swords, right? You actually you spent 5 points to nerf your 10-point unit down to 8 points of value because you're scared of Walder, and you took a wound to boot. So that unit gets to exist in this meta now, one more time before it gets changed or reworked into 2021. So you get to do cool stuff like that and have fun and decide, is that unit ever worth 10 points now? Because if it's not worth 10 points when Walder's not in the game, it's not worth 10 points in 2021, right? So now you also have a better measuring scale for what you're comparing your spoilers to also in the coming weeks or when those cards come out, right? So those types of things, there's always things for people if you play the game. There's value in reps. There's values in seeing the game on the table, no matter the format. So as long as you play honest games and make honest lists and enjoy your opponent's company and you coach and you build community, these events will always be a good time and they will always be a great option for everyone, honestly. Just healthy things for the game state and the meta as a whole.
And just a short point, when we talk about competitive players out there that would be interested in this event, I would encourage anyone to try it out because, what better way to prove that you're a good player than to not rely on what you're used to. It's solely on your knowledge of the game and sort of adapting to the situation. And then for newer players, of course, a lot of the game is knowing how factions interact with each other, knowing their deck, knowing their units. So I think this is sort of like a win-win for both sides of not only newer players and competitive players as well. Okay, so we're going to move on to the next segment. I thought it would be really, really fun to do sort of like a live list build. We'll start with Max and Tim here. I am excited just because although I'm not participating in the event, I would love to see how someone else starts their list building process. So Max and Tim, how would you guys approach first thing when you're thinking about this tournament and building a list for it?
So I guess first thing I would think about is, for me, I guess who's also in my team and what armies are they going to build? So in this case, Max is a little bit more experienced of a Baratheon player. And knowing who else is playing in my team, my other position that I could kind of fill in would be Lannisters. So I'll probably end up building a Lannister list. It's what commander do I feel like I would be able to pilot, but maybe not everyone else would. Probably not going to pick Tyrion. That's just a little stronger. I could pick Jaime, as people have called out. I've have a little bit of experience with him. Also, wouldn't mind doing a Tywin list. So I'd probably, in my free time, build between those two lists. So with something like Jaime, it's what would synergize with him. Do I have a theme that I'd want to run that isn't completely meta? But then you start to ask, is it too obvious of a list? And would people actually feel comfortable running it? I guess I don't know if you touched exactly on the point of how lists score points. But once we would get to round 5, if no one ended up picking the list that I run, that's going to be better than a list that other people have picked, but it's constantly lost in terms of it's considered a worse list that we would have available for us to pick. So
I should definitely clarify that. I don't know if I brought it up during the during the breakdown of the tournament rules. Yeah, so for team scoring, so for each win that your team gets, that's 3 points. And if another team gets a win with one of your lists, that's 1 point. So, that's one thing to consider when you're building your list as well. Let's start with an actual build. So what do you think, Tim and Max? Would you want to build a Jaime list or a Tywin list? Because it seemed like those two really stood out to Tim.
Let's do a Jaime list.
Let's start out with Jaime.
Let's have fun with Jaime. Jaime wants people to miss. You want to be drawing the what is it? The one that gets where they miss, it deals wounds back onto them.
They riposte.
Yeah, thank you. So Pycelle would synergize with him. If we want to go the Lannister supremacy route, we would also want to bring in Cersei. Something that could be interesting in terms of a deterrent is, could we also throw in Joffrey, which will then potentially open up things like Kingsguard attachments, which, aren't always the best, but what other tournament format do you get to consider picking Barristan Selmy Kingsguard attachment?
I like that. If you guys don't mind, I'm going to throw in a couple of suggestions here, especially since you mentioned Joffrey, is if you're going to be running the 3 NCU army, I think it would be a good opportunity for maybe a couple of Stormcrow Mercenaries to cheapen the Kingsguard, if you decide to go that route, of course.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm thinking maybe Stormcrow Archers might like Preston Greenfield, right?
That's always a good combo. Do more actions, draw more cards.
We don't really see Stormcrow Mercenaries in the meta right now, but I think with the Jaime list, when you have cards like Deadly Riposte and Kingslayer Renown, you're able to be a little bit stickier on the board,
right?
Especially with the weakened tokens that you're dishing out with Pycelle. So, I think that's a good idea.
How about Boris Blunt? We never see him, but that can be kind of scary in Stormcrow Mercs that you really don't think are going to go down. They got a 4-up armor. You can throw out some Wealth of the Rock. You got Jaime cards to kind of keep them up.
Hear me out here. We're going to run Joffrey. You should run Arys Oakheart, because all the meta buzz about -1 to hit being super strong in 2021. This gives you a great environment to test that theory with a tactics card that punishes it. Makes this list very close to new Jaime while not being top tier for this event.
I love that.
I love it.
Drop him in Mercs.
Yep.
So right now I got Guardsmen with Jaime as your commander. I got Stormcrow Mercs with Arys Oakheart. I've got Stormcrow Archers with Preston Greenfield. I've got Pycelle as an NCU. I've got Joffrey as an NCU. Do we want one more NCU? See, I really like Littlefinger when you're running these Kingsguard too, but I guess Joffrey doesn't really give you the need for that, except that if someone does drop a Varys in there, you still got Littlefinger to nab that crown when you don't even really need to. But I just like Littlefinger too.
Sure, and there is a nice ordering interaction where if you can get Petyr on the board first, then you're up against someone else that has 3 NCUs. You don't actually have to rely on playing Joffrey, and then you don't have to incur putting the panic to having your opponent put the panic out on you as well. since he's not actually claiming a tactic zone.
Are we potentially taking out Joffrey and replacing him with Petyr, or are you thinking you're going to go?
No, I was just saying both.
Yeah, you would.
Oh,
3 NCU. Pycelle, Joffrey, Littlefinger. You don't have to, but
Yeah,
he's just a little different. He's not a Varys. He's not a Walder. He requires some creativity.
If you're going first, you can use them on Crown first turn, claim another zone. If your opponent takes Crown from you, turning off the Kingsguard, you have Joffrey that you can play faster.
Yep.
I like that a lot.
And Littlefinger is a high skill cap piece that I don't think is going to change. So again, it goes back to our litmus test for 2021. But also, it's a good sample that it's a piece that people may misplay, that if you play this list in later rounds, you're more likely to be successful with if you're more experienced with Petyr Baelish.
All right, so we got 13 points left to make up some stuff with some pop now, because we got nothing in there that's really going to cause too much damage. So you want to throw Mountainsmen, you want Halberds, we got Pyros. People never run those guys, unless you're running Gregor Commander.
I'm almost tempted to tell you guys to run some, what are they called?
Warrior Sons
Dude,
with...
the Clown Warriors. What are they? I'm so bad.
Mummers.
The neutral
Mummer
guy, Chris.
Skirmishers.
Get it together.
Yeah, you can't run them yet. You can't run them.
You know, the insane clown posse.
Yeah, ICP, the Juggalos. Jesus. Well, you will have the weakened tokens being farted out all over the place because of Pycelle.
Unfortunately, I think you guys have hit your neutral tax limit.
I think so too.
Oh,
Well,
yes.
no.
We're at 15.
We're not
We
quite
can get
there
another
yet.
Stormcrow Mercenaries in there.
Oh, yeah. Or just, the world's greatest unit, Bolton Cutthroats. But we're trying to stay off meta, and we're trying to look at a list that we would feel comfortable playing against because of its skill cap. That's why, Halberdiers are great, because they're a positioning unit. So people who don't play Lannisters or don't play Halberdiers or are newer to the game, they just struggle with Halberdiers. I remember for, the first year or two the game was out, people would just cry the Halberdiers sucked and Mountainsmen were just in every way better. But then you'd run, I'd run a list that was just a whole bunch of Halberdiers and nobody knew how to attack it.
I was going to continue on to attachments that go with Halberdiers.
Yes.
Because if we're still going Kingsguard route, Boros Blount, we do have the option of someone charges into us, we do our set for charge, and then we can, after they attack us, they would take D3 wounds. Kind of a good deterrent as far as if you're going to come charging into me, you better be ready to take some damage. Or Mandon Moore has the nice combo of giving them +1 to hit, which is something that Halberdiers they got the 8 dice, they got the 4 up. So you always feel bad about how many hits you get. So giving them +1 and then potentially vicious if they don't do too much damage to you on the counterattack is a nice combo as well.
We have Bob in our chat right now. He just sort of crept in through the back door. In our live chat, you mentioned a combo that I think is pretty relevant with this list. If you want to go ahead and chime in here.
Yeah, Wild Lord Commander Bob Pierce. Yep. Sorry for being a little late tonight. I was thinking. I think Halberdiers are kind of. I think they're pretty good and they're underutilized. I know I saw Carl run Halberds with Salmi. That was in a Sparrow list. But it basically made them an auto pass on panic tests, which whenever they you guys can't rattle me in the chat, you can't do that. Okay, I gotta quit looking at the chat so I talk. And, so I was saying Selmy kind of just gives them the plus morale, and then if for some reason you did run Sparrow, you could do it without Sparrow. You run some werewood trees around them, stick them on a node, they aren't going anywhere. You charge them, they're getting hit. A lot of people just don't know how to handle them. And then a lot of times people, like Max was saying with Halberds, people are afraid to charge with them. They just want to get charged. I think that's a trap. I think just sitting there waiting, people aren't going to charge you from the front if they don't have to, unless it's like a unit of berserkers who is just like, yes, hit me before I come in, But what is it? Is it the assault veteran? Is that the one that gives you hold the line?
Yeah.
Yes.
Them with the assault veterans, great too. yeah, you aren't going to get the bonus when they charge you, but after they do charge you, you're going to get that plus that bonus, and that also makes it so you're not afraid to go get engaged with them. You initiate a charge when you're going first the next turn, and you use that assault veteran attachment, and you're hitting hard. I mean, what's that give you? It gives you 2 dice and plus one.
Plus one to hit.
Yeah, 10
for
dice.
10 dice on threes.
That's nuts, and they're an 8/8/4, correct? So it's just
Assault vet's good too. It gives us a little bit of room because if we put Barristan in them, we only got 4 points left.
Right.
Yeah, Selmy's expensive. It makes them
So we probably
a unit.
maybe just I like the assault vet in there because that still frees us up 6 points to put something else out there. What are we feeling, guys? Do we need crossbows with no attachments?
That's exactly what I was just thinking. So is this going to be one of the lists that the Gamer Haven Finest crew runs? Or is this just going to be something where
No, this is us. This is us. We just made it.
All right.
This is the Lannister slot that we are submitting.
I'm going to be 100%
Everybody
honest here.
knows.
I will absolutely play this list.
Well, it's got a high skill cap. Everything's got a little bit of squish to it. There's only one unit that can't really be panic bombed. Everything else can be panic bombed. You don't have a ton of healing. You're going to have to know what you're doing with this.
Yeah, taking in the game mode into account, I would 100% play this.
Yeah. You can bunker down on some nodes if it's like, one of the 5-node, 5 objective games. You got ranged units for backline holding. You've got, not a whole lot of pop-up at the front, but that's okay. You're going to just panic them off the board. And they're not running Ultramet either, so that's all right.
So let's think about this a little bit. Do you do Lannister Crossbowmen, or do you put in another Halberdier and you run on the front line with them to guard the front, and you're holding nodes with them, hoping that they get charged?
Yeah, you could do that.
I mean, that does give us a front line of Lannister and Halberdier.
Yep. Stick Jaime right in the middle of them, and then just protect the flanks by the halberds.
That leaves our primary damage as archers and mercenaries kind of being able to maneuver around.
And now we got Petyr in there to make sure our Stormcrow Mercenaries are firing multiple times.
All right, so it sounds like you guys have a pretty solid list going for you. So for the audience, I'll just do a quick recap of what you guys got. So Jaime Commander in a unit of guardsmen. We have Stormcrow Mercenaries with Arys Oakheart, Stormcrow Archers with Preston Greenfield. We have Lannister Halberdiers with an assault veteran, and then a unit of Lannister Crossbowmen. NCUs are Pycelle, Joffrey, and Petyr. For our audience out there, Max's team would love for you guys to build a list for them. Okay, so I'll actually turn this over to Bob now and ask the question, what faction would you guys want the fans and patrons to list build for?
I was thinking Starks. I know it's a weird one, but they're just such a powerful faction. We already know that. I think it would be fun for the audience to try to submit lists that are still functional, but not actually going to just completely control the game and automatically be a top tier list. Something that's challenging and has some synergy to where you have to actually think of some more strategy rather than just your on-field play. Something that's going to require setup versus sudden charge, or our typical Howland. As soon as something activates, we play a card. Something a little more difficult. Great John Commander is fun. Roderick. Both of those could require a little bit more setup to use their cards. So that's what I was thinking. I don't know. I don't know if anyone else has any ideas or anything, but that's just something that came to mind.
Yeah, I think Starks are a good place to start because it, honestly, to a lot of people, it's going to be a fairly unexplored space because it's been solved for so long. Like I mentioned at some point, talking with people, is I think Baratheons from my community would be different because the loyalists all play the game so differently. So I'm really curious to see what they would do with Baratheons to make them interesting, because Baratheon diehards really navigate that faction differently than everybody else, honestly.
Speaking of Baratheons, Max, you are a Stannis loyalist, and I understand, like no one else pilots the list like you do. So can you just quickly go over that list and then maybe give some insight on why you think that would be good to submit for this tournament?
Yeah, so one thing we had talked about was running a Stannis list with a lot of self-harm in it. So it's a couple units of Baratheon Wardens with no attachment, Bastards Girls with Stannis 1, Bolton Cutthroats, Stormcrow Archers with Lieutenant, and then Selyse and Shireen, Melisandre, and Shira. And you basically just aggressively discard until you get Tactical Approach onto Stannis, and then you use him like a tactical nuke to just evaporate units off of the table. Really, when I'm making these lists for this tournament or working with Bob and Tim and Brandon on it, we're just going to probably go through each faction and look at the commanders that don't get run very often and try to create something clever there. So looking at commanders that people just don't like or aren't on meta, and then, try to build a list around that, just like we just did there with Jaime.
Okay, so that was really fun for me to actually sit down and listen to you guys build a list from scratch. But turning it over to Charles, I know that none of us are on your team, but how do you feel about us building a list live for your team?
Yeah, let's go. Factions. So my team has basically a dedicated Night's Watch player in Griffin who's been showing people how it's done. So I'm going to leave Night's Watch alone. I do believe we have a more or less dedicated Lannister player and a guy who dabbles in Starks. So that gives us neutrals, free folk, Baratheons, and Targaryens that I think are on the table for a community list. So we can go with any of those four.
So if you guys want my opinion, I think considering the rule set of the tournament and the discussions around a faction and commander that maybe has a higher skill cap, I'm going to have to go with Free Folk and Steer Commander.
Show us some Steer, buddy.
Steer sees a lot of play right now. My first instinct is to build a Tormund list for this event, personally.
Let's do it. I mean, it's your team. Let's start with that.
All right, so we got Mr. Tormund. I'm going to explain why. You want people to play your list to win games. Everybody loves Tormund. Tormund's a good time. And two, Tormund's actually not easy to play. And he's a starter box commander, so I think it's good all around. Personally, I've got opinions on where to put Tormund in a unit. What do you guys think? What type of unit you think Tormund should be in?
Cave Dwellers is my first thought, but that is I'm sure that's everyone's first thought. What do you guys think?
I'm not sure. I mean, he gets all that gas with charging, so yeah, the speed is really nice as a cleanup crew.
All right, so basically we're on the same page. I think Tormund should be. I think my list submission is Elites Free Folk without Styre. That's what I'm proposing here.
Spicy.
So one thing I've seen, I don't know if you want to include this because I don't know how you feel about Giants, but Giants with a Tormund list are pretty awesome. You can use the counter charge to kind of make it like a swift advance. Because they have such good morale. And then what's the other one? The Rush of Aggression actually synergizes real well with healing giants as well. I've been on the receiving end of that a few times. I'm just not sure if that's too powerful for something that you're looking for.
But you're talking about Rallying Assault, for the wounds,
Okay, yeah, that's the one.
Giants are a good call, good shout. I do like Giants and Tormund a lot. But I think in ELO, that is a really strong advantage into certain factions. Like in this sort of off-meta build, I think factions are going to really struggle to deal with Giants. So I don't know if I want my lists in round 5 or round 1 to have to deal with that. I mentioned earlier in the shouts that with a Walder list meta, I think we should go big and go with 10 points of bony goodness with a rattle shirt and bone load destroys. How y'all feeling about that play?
Love it.
I'm all about a Death Star unit.
We're just talking about charging stuff. We got Tormund and Cave Dweller Savages. We got Rattle Boys. We're going big.
All right, so we have your 10-point unit. We're not talking about just a Follower's Bone. We're talking about the Bone Lord's Chosen here.
Bone Lords chosen with Rattleshirt.
All right, let's
10
go.
points of spice. All right, let's go and throw in some NCUs before we're out of points.
Real quick before we get the NCUs. So for our listeners, Tormund, quick overview. So he has Overrun as an order, and he also has Shattering Assault. So it gives his unit Sundering on the charge. He's got some pretty aggressive cards. He has Rallying Assault. So when a friendly unit charges, one friendly unit which may restore up to D3 plus 1 wounds. If it's Tormund's unit, they can do 4 instead. He's got Counter Charge. Everyone knows what that does. And he's got Rush of Aggression, which is when a friendly unit charges, it's +2 attack dice. And if you target Tormund's unit, the defender becomes vulnerable. So a very aggro type commander here. All right, so what do you guys think about NCUs? I'm going to actually turn it over to Tim. Tim is not a Free Folk player.
No, I know very little of Free Folk.
You should just shout out a character that you think would be an NCU.
Yeah, let's just see what sticks to the wall.
What sticks to the wall? So we were saying no to Stir. I mean, immediately, I know we want to be charging. Lady Val gives us the ability to free maneuver.
Lady
So
Val
Lady Val.
in. We got it. Lady Val. All right. Who else you got?
I'm almost thinking Mance.
My man Mance. Exactly what I was thinking. Can't have Free Folk taking the wall without Mance. And why else would Rattleshirt and Tormund be getting along anyway, right? Gotta have Mance to keep the family together.
Got to have someone negotiate between all the clans.
Hey, and speaking of middlemen, I think this list needs Craster. All right, so we need a couple of Raiders. We need some Raiders. Or do we need some Trappers?
Oh, man, you said you're going elite. I think you need to go full elite, man.
Full
You don't
elite,
need
huh?
those guys. No chaff.
Yeah, nothing under 5 points.
Nothing under 5 points.
Fen.
Stands.
No
They're
Fen.
off meta.
It's because they're bad.
You need something to
I
countercharge
know that.
into. Have them taunt something. Pull out the
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man, the taunt.
Love
into the counter charge. Oh.
Okay, first of all, have any of you Free Folk players ever had taunt pop off? Because
I
not
have
seen it
literally
ever.
never had a unit fail the morale check from taunt. And I will honestly say I have about 13 games at my shop playing Thins.
I think I have to add to that, as a Lannister player, I now get to feel that pain with a attachment that gives us taunt. And I've tried.
After hearing that, I think you definitely need Thens in there.
Thins. All right. We'll throw some Thins.
You know what's going to happen. They're going to play against it the first round, and the Thens are going to taunt them.
Yeah, I'm going to fail everything.
And you're going to fail it.
Giant.
All right,
All right, so
so
we got 8 points left after that. All right, so we're putting a raid leader in these Thins.
okay.
All right, so that we can YOLO swing other units across the board. That leaves us 8 points to spend right now. We're only at 3 on-field activations. That's a problem, even for Elite Faction.
Another giant, and just sneak a skin changer into one of the other units.
I'll go with 7 activation free folk. Yeah, really trying to make me do this to people.
Dude, no. Okay, now we're getting into the territory where no one would choose this list. But okay,
Yeah,
remind me. So we have Bone Lords chosen. Okay, that's with Rattleshirt. So that's 10
Yes.
points. We have Thens with the raid leader. What unit is with Tormund? Are we going
Cave
with the
Dweller
Cave Dwellers?
Savages. Cave Dweller Savages.
Okay.
Let's do for the other 8 points. If we're trying to avoid insignificant and super cheap units, let's do double Spearwives.
Okay. I was gonna say Followers of Bone with Jarl, but I like Spearwise as well.
I don't think this list is gonna really leverage Jarl very well. But I think having a Sundering on the charge, Spearwives at 4 points, and a decent range attack profile is solid.
I was going to say the Sundering of the Charge definitely still fits within the theme of
Yeah,
the army, if you want to keep looking at it from that standpoint. So
So I'm saying, like, yeah, YOLO charges go is a thing. And Spearwives are decent enough on the range that they can chip in damage without Styre. Though at this point, this list did go a direction I didn't think it was going to go, and I probably should have put Styre in instead of Mance, but I'm leaving Mance in. I'm sticking to my guns. You can't keep a ragtag group together like this without Mance.
Nice. Now we will see if anyone does choose this list. I honestly just want to see Thens pop off their order just once. I just wanted it to happen once.
I mean, As someone that's never played Free Folk, if I get forced into that situation, it will be nice not having to field like 10 activations and just not know how to maneuver around the field.
Yeah, I think there is a really good chance you get 4 players on a team in the TSL that none of them know how to play Free Folk very much, because that is a thing. A lot of those teams didn't have Free Folk players to begin with, and they're going to be like, man, I could play that list. And it's going to happen.
And they're going to learn quick that 90% of the time, they're not going to have the cards they need.
Hey, you got Crass, so you can draw cards, dog.
Wait, we're talking about Baratheons or Free Folk?
You have a great card drawing CU. You have cards.
We just can't play them.
Sure.
All right, so that is the Free Folk list for Charles's team. All right, third part of the segment. I'm actually going to bring in Steven, otherwise known as Stovetop. I don't know if he knew I was going to do this, but he has been listening in on every podcast. He chats with us live. Steven, are you there?
I am.
What's up, brother?
Hey, what's up, man?
Yo, okay, so you were one of the last teams to join up for this tournament, and I paired you with, from what I understand, 3 other players that you have never met before, right?
Yeah, never met him.
So how's it been? I think you guys have been a team for maybe just about a week now. What's that been like, sort of preparing for this tournament?
It's been pretty cool. We did a bunch of list building the other day, and ran through. We first came up with our name, of course, and we ran through some things like, of course, Slaughter House. We wanted something metal based, so we went with Motley Crue, and we wanted to for our list building to go a different direction. We wanted more fun list building, and we wanted to kind of build our list based off of the Motley Crue song titles. So we chose one was like Bastards Girls. We did Bastards Girls, Girls, Girls. So there's 3 sets of Bastards Girls. And one with Ramsay as a commander, one with Bronn, and one with a Stormcrow lieutenant. A Blackguard with Ruth, and then Petyr and Tycho.
So, and you actually got to experiment with that list. I think I dropped in on you and your teammate Chris, playing.
Yep.
That
and that was Chris's list.
What was that like? Were you playing that list, or were you playing the Greyjoy list?
I was playing the Greyjoy list. I let him play the Bastards Girls list. I haven't played neutrals. I've only played Night's Watch, and I've messed around with the Greyjoys on TTS a little bit, so I kind of knew some of their stuff. So I picked his, he picked mine. It was kind of perfect for what we were kind of play testing, and it was fun. I mean, it was a blast. We sat there and probably laughed for more than half of it.
That's awesome.
Just combos that you wouldn't think would happen. And making crazy saves on stuff that had to happen. It was a really good game, and it was a good insight into different ways to build the lists.
Would you consider yourself a competitive player? Like, have you participated in other tournament type events?
No, not for a Song of Ice and Fire. I went to Adepticon for 40K. I played 40K for 20 years. Since I was 18, 17, something like that. So I just got into Song of Ice and Fire probably 8 months ago. And me and my friends have just been playing on TTS and playing in person. And I've never played competitive a Song of Ice and Fire, but it is so much fun to learn the armies, just different things that I haven't seen on the streams. Like nobody's running 3 Bastards Girls. Nobody's running. We have a list that we came up with, Jailhouse Rock for Night's Watch. That's mostly conscripts and Alistair and I think a stone thrower's in there.
It sounds like you guys are enjoying the list building aspect of it.
Yeah, it is, and the back and forth. Like I said, I've never met these guys before. One guy's from Great Britain, so that's the guy I played with, Chris. It was really nice to meet him. We had a great game. I've only played on TTS with my friends. I've never played with anybody besides my friends. So it was cool. It was a good experience, and I really loved it.
Well, that's awesome, man. Thanks for stopping in, and as always, man, thank you for your support.
No problem, man. I love your guys' work. You guys are hilarious, and whatever I can do, just let me know. I love it.
Hell yeah, brother.
All right, thank you.
All right, so on to our last segment. And if you're not a competitive player, feel free to tune out, but this won't take very long. Charles, let's talk about how we've been doing in the World Cup. Do you want to go first?
Oh yeah, I'm the newest punter for the New Orleans Saints. I'm really good at throwing games that I should probably win. No, I had a really close game, closer than the score looked, honestly, with our Deepmouth out of Indonesia. He's one of the Indonesian players to join the North American region. And he played a real clean game of Dance with Dragons with Baratheons and took the win from me. So I'm 1-1. I play the Free Folk Mirror going into this weekend into Winds of Winter, which is kind of a hard to judge game mode. So I'm interested in that challenge. But overall, my games have been good. My opponents have been fine. I knew Deep was a good player going into it, and I also felt I didn't have enough prep time the week before, and it showed in the way I played. So he's just a really good player, and he didn't make any mistakes. So when you come in under form in some of these competitions, a lot of these guys are playing to win. So I didn't get a chance to make a comeback to make up for my lapse of judgment in the second round. My first week was also a Baratheon matchup in Honed and Ready, which I was very comfortable in that game mode. For those listening, we're using 1.7's game modes with 1.6 as rules, which does change things just a little bit, and that it also gives Free Folk an advantage in a lot of cases because we only have on-field commanders, and most of those game modes favor on-field commanders just slightly, right? So overall, I'm feeling pretty good going into the later rounds for that being one of the reasons. But I am 1-1, which essentially puts me in a must-win situation. A couple of 1 or 2 3-2s will probably top 8 in North America just because of the player count. But 4-1 guarantees you in, right? So the goal is first to 4. So I'm shooting for a big win this week, and then obviously next week.
And I'll speak for Bob really fast. I know he was really excited. Actually, sort of worried going into his match because Bob is playing Starks. But for round 2, he was matched up with one of the better Stark players internationally, a player named Ariakis. Some of you actually may know Ariakis as Clarence from Guerrilla Miniatures Games. I don't know if you guys watch those battle reports, but he is the individual that is featured on a lot of those videos. Bob actually won the game. He won't consider it as an upset, but the rest of the world does. So shout out to Bob for going 2-0 in the tournament. Like my co-host Weasel, I'm 1-1 right now. I lost my first match against a really good Lannister player, N-Line out of Canada. And then I won my second match against Roderick Starks. So that's sort of the competitive update from the Slaughterhouse crew. All right, so wrapping up. Again, it was fun building the lists with Charles and Max's team. If you guys want to submit a list for Max's team, we're looking for a Stark list. So if you guys are watching this video on YouTube, feel free to drop in list suggestions within the comments. You can also go to my Facebook, Sunday Slaughter Gaming, and leave a comment on there with the list that you come up with. And I'll turn it over to Tim. Do you have any shout outs? Thank you so much for joining us today.
No shout outs other than just Gamers Haven and all the people that are still showing up to play on Fridays and Sundays. Unlike some of the people on here, I mainly play in store, not on TTS. So would love to see some more people in person in whatever capacity. And I guess anyone else still out there playing in person.
What about you, Max?
So I'm going to do a crazy one because if you know me, I'm a little different player than this. But I'm going to shout out to Song of Ice and Fire Stats with Carlo and Mickey over there. They had some really nice words to say about your podcast here, Chris. And I listened through their most recent cast. And if you guys are looking for more competitive data, that's a really good resource for that. I know Chris has mentioned it before, and so is Charles. But they had some really, really nice words to share about Charles and Chris. And again, if you're looking for data, more objective findings of tournaments and how they're going and what lists are working, that's a great resource to go check out too. So
absolutely. And what about you, Charles?
Big shout out to the listeners, and I don't mean in a cheesy way of, thanks to fans, but a lot of people have taken the time to reach out to us and tell us ideas for the show, how they feel about the show, the content, the guests, and that also extends to some of the more prominent members in the community. Carla and those guys gave us a big shout out. Obviously, I am a man of opinions and many, many words. And the fact that people actually are listening to those words and responding positively is super humbling and really exciting at the same time. And I'm really grateful for just the interest they've shown and the energy and effort they've put into reaching out to us. It means a lot. You don't normally get positive reviews before you get negative reviews, right? The nature of reviews, right? You always get your first negative Yelp review. You always get your first negative Amazon review. But the fact that we got positive reviews out the gate and they took time out of their day to message us directly means a lot to me, honestly. And if you got things you want us to talk about or things you think we're wrong about or anything, feel free to drop us a comment on any of the posts. If you love what you see and listen to, like and subscribe and that kind of thing. But when in doubt, hit me up on the Discord. And until then, just roll better, I guess.
All right. And then finally, my shout outs, of course, my wonderful co-host Charles and my guests, Max, Tim, Bob, who took off, and then the special appearance by Steven. And then biggest thanks to all of my patrons. Thank you guys so much. It's because of you that I'm able to make this content for you guys. I love the game so much, and not only that, I love this community so much. So we will see you next week. And I will go ahead and close out the show with my shout-outs. As always, thank you so much to the patrons. We could not do this without you guys. If you haven't checked out the last battle report, go to my YouTube channel, Sunday Slaughter, and let us know what you think. We've got Season 3 coming up, so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to pilot some of the fan and patron-submitted lists, so go ahead and start thinking about any lists that you would like to see on camera. And with that, we are out.